Okay, I'm back. So here's what I got so far. This is where I left off. I'm gonna keep going, and I need to make it a little softer as I go through this area. So I'm gonna put my gloves on and get started. Kind of soften this up a bit more. And all I'm doing is just pushing the ink back and forth. So hey everyone, my microphone died here, so I figured I'd just record my voice over this to just explain my thought process as I paint through this. So here I've added enough alcohol to move this black back inside, and you can tell that there's a blue under stain, or under, yeah, it's an under stain pretty much, like that's stained into the canvas. And the reason being, again, as I think I mentioned in part 2, is that I sanded this after I kilsed it, and then I forgot to re-kills it, and so parts of the canvas were exposed. See, as I'm pouring alcohol, you can see how the black ink reveals an undertone of blue stain that's already been done. So here I decided to lift up a lot of the ink because it absorbed a lot of the ink because it's just too much. And you see, as I'm wiping, you'll start to see this design underneath, which is kind of cool. And you can't be afraid to, do this. This is, I'm literally just wiping it up, mopping it up. Because you can always go in and add more and use alcohol to move the existing ink. And you'll see in a minute. It's obviously a lot of ink. Like, you can tell the paper towel that I have is just full of ink. So I'm wiping back, and you can see that there's the original blue that was left over from the pitch black. I'm sorry, not pitch black, the Copic black. So it'd be a good base layer, so I'm considering that dark blue as a base layer. Okay, so right here, since I'm just getting rid of all the fibers that the paper towel left behind, because once that gets mixed into the alcohol, it leaves, like, the alcohol will collect around it, and it leaves some awkward spots. So that area over there, the idea is for me to soften this area up and expand the compression that's on the right side of this video and have it expand to a bit larger fracture lines. So here I'm still trying to wipe this stuff down. You can't be afraid to mess up. I mean, this is, and that's the fortunate thing about alcohol ink. You really can't mess up. You can always go back and reiterate. Never throw away your old canvases or even your Yapo paper, because as soon as you add alcohol ink, or I'm sorry, alcohol or denatured alcohol, you should be able to lift up the ink from your medium or substrate. So I'm softening up some of the black edges so that it feels like it's more of a blend. And you'll see why I'm doing this, because you'll see once I start adding the color. It's a lot easier once it's softened like that versus like having the harsh lines. It's another paper towel of dirty ink. That is a lot of ink, as you can see right there. So here I'm just kind of pushing the canvas up from the bottom just to see if it's still really loose, because I noticed that I have a loose area on the canvas that I may have to re-stretch after I'm done with the painting. But as I'm going through this, I'm going to start adding color. So I started adding the purple color that I had. And here I'm adding the alcohol to it after I've added the color. It's just another method. And I'm not going to make the same mistake of adding too much at a time. So I'm just now, the idea of this is to incorporate this base purple in there to just give it a bit more purplish color versus the blue that we see a lot of. And now I'm mixing the blue and the purple. That's how you kind of, or the black and the purple, the remaining black that was on there. Just adding ink anywhere that I feel like I want to move it. I'll add a couple areas of ink, or I'm sorry, alcohol, and it'll help me move it a bit further. So I'm not really interested right now in the lines. Right now I'm just trying to add just a base coat of this purple so that I can add the lines later to this base coat. And I'm using the brush now to connect the lines of where I left off to the new areas of the purple I just created, so that it feels like it's a seamless transition. Because when you pour alcohol down, it starts where the alcohol is. It starts lifting up the ink and it makes a crest. And so with the brush, what I'm doing is I'm literally moving the direction of where I want the alcohol to go and the color to go. So I'm making these like transition lines to existing lines on the canvas of where I left off. Hopefully that makes sense. Just load up my brush and I'm just adding the lines here. Just make sure you load your brush up with alcohol so that you have enough to, you don't want to dry brush it. Now dry brushing means where your alcohol, you don't have a lot of alcohol on your brush, but it's enough for you to be able to kind of fade it and blend it, but not enough for you to make lines with it. Right now I'm just creating the direction of where I want the lines to go. So I'm not even worried about blending it or anything like that right now. Just picking up. See how I'm like using the alcohol to kind of lift up the old ink to see if I can lift up that blue stain. And the answer was no. It's stained on there. Just got to play with what I have. So here I'm going to add a little bit of the cobalt, and I'm going to use the alcohol to spread it, but I'm going to use the brush because it's a loaded brush with the alcohol, and that helps basically spread it through, and I'm just kind of guiding it to where I want the alcohol or the color to go and the color to be, and I'm trying to blend it and mesh it into the violet or that purple color. So here I'm just going to add a little bit more alcohol, but I'm pushing the color out so that I have an even flow of it out. And then I'm going to put a little bit more ink in the center and push it to the right of your screen. There we go. So I'm adding it at the tip and just pushing the alcohol. Just adding a little bit of alcohol to it helps it spread. Then it gives it a little bit of a layer effect because I'm not pushing it as far out as the first layer. So there you go. So now we're going to go to the other side and work the other side of the painting. And I'm going to add some cobalt to balance this purple out that we have. I want to make sure that I mix the two colors in together a little so that we have a slightly purplish blue. And also, I don't want to lose this type of blue because this blue is much richer than the stained blue that the Copic black left behind. So I'm not really worried about the direction right now. I'm just trying to fill in the base. So just moving the color around to the areas that I like to see color. The direction will happen with the brush work. So all those like fractured lines will happen with the brush. I'm just trying to make sure that I have the right color as the base undercoat. So I am moving some of that black back out, and I'm bringing some of it in, but I'm trying to get as much of it off the canvas as I can. So that's what I'm doing here. So I am mixing the blue with some of that black, which gives you the violet color, along with the pink that's in the center. Just trying to spread it, give it some dense areas and some lighter areas. And then I'll use the brush in a minute to form the lines that I want and the direction that I want the ink or the energy to go through. So this is just moving the ink around a bit. There we go. I'm just trying to get it to dry and spread in certain areas and dense in others, as I mentioned earlier. So here's where I'm going to move the brush, move the colors with the brush in that direction. I think my hand gestures give you the idea. So I load my brush with alcohol and try to find existing lines, and then that's where I connect those lines and make new ones. And I typically have a blow dryer in my right hand, and I paint with my left. So because I'm left-handed, you would probably, if you're right-handed, you'd probably have it in the opposite hand. So all I'm doing is just making new lines from existing lines to kind of blend. So there you go. You have to also think about not worrying about messing it up, because that's, sometimes people are hesitant in drawing over something that they really, really like. And that's okay. You don't have to always, you know, uh, draw over something that you like, but I guess the analogy that I'd like to use with alcohol ink, it's like solving a Rubik's Cube. I don't know if you've ever done that before, but sometimes you have to break a certain side to fix the other side. And that's what happens with alcohol ink, I think. You're solving the problem. So sometimes you have to like move a couple orange, like you have one whole side done or almost a whole side done, but you have to break that side in order to fix like the white side or the blue side. What I'm getting at is it's the same kind of concept. You can't really, if you're doing all of it at once for a smaller piece, I could see how that would be easier, where you don't have to, typically there's less area, and then you may fall in love with a certain area and you don't have to mess with that because it doesn't affect the rest of it. But for a larger piece like this, there are areas that I can leave alone, but primarily some of the lines that I'm running right now, I'm having to go over with the alcohol, over some of the things that I did like about it, but it's going to give me a better result. So, and that's what you have to believe. Just like the Rubik's Cube, you're going to be able to solve it, but you're going to have to break a few of the sides that you thought you were done on to complete the full thing, the full cube. So that's the best thing it just came to me, just because I know that it's hard to explain this process sometimes when you really fall in love with an area that you worked, but you have to go in and add gold to it or add a different color to it, and it changes that area. So yeah. So right now I'm just trying to add a bit more alcohol and trying to connect lines. So I'm just adding a loaded brush and just trying to, it becomes dry pretty quickly because I think this area requires a lot of alcohol, but you can see how I'm just kind of emulating these lines, and then I'll blend them at the end. I'm blending it a little bit at a time, and I'm also creating more connections, more lines. This part takes quite some time. If I had a bigger brush, I may be able to do it faster. It's just see, now I'm adding alcohol because I want to be able to move more. And now that I've spread the color where I want it with the brush, now it's letting me move it a bit quicker with the alcohol. There we go. Now I use the brush to reconnect. So it's a slow and tedious process, but it works. Like I mentioned that I don't like that line, and I want the line to go in a direction. And that's why I'm breaking it up. Adding more alcohol. So I'm trying to contain the alcohol just in this little region because I like some of the things happening, but I also want to soften it up. So that's why I'll bring in I'll push the purple in and the pink in more, and then fade it out. See, this is where I use the loaded brush to connect the alcohol ink further in with more control. Obviously, the brush gives you a lot more control. Sorry, my head is in the way. So I'm just moving the ink and the alcohol where I want it. It's a long and tedious process, but I enjoy it. It's fun because you're just giving direction and the piece starts coming together nicely. Get a little bit more control over the areas. So I put the alcohol there because I want to break. You see, I want to break between that light area on the left of my blow dryer and the area that I'm working in, and that gives me a really nice thin gradual line. And then I go in there and shift the alcohol, push the alcohol back into the center by creating smaller lines. At this point it's just dry brushing. So I'm going to take a quick break here, and I'll be right back. Hopefully you'll stay around to watch the rest. We're about halfway through. Welcome back. Alright. Now I'm using a pointed brush, which gives me a different type of line. And all I'm doing here is just trying to gradually fade it and make new lines with the pointed rounded brush. And again, I want to split here. So I'm just trying to fade it or wisp it, make it very light on the edges. And I do that by adding alcohol on the outside edge and push it in from the outside in. And you can see how faded it looks on the bottom. Again, so here I'm going to try to connect those lines again, give it a little bit of a continuity throughout. There we go. I'm going to move my big head out of the way so you can see. There we go. See how that line is very faint? And I'll go in, depending on how much alcohol and how much ink I have on my brush and on the canvas, you start creating. See how I'm trying to lift the alcohol off the canvas to give myself a little bit more of an edge? See that? It's hard to see because of my arm and the ink, but you can see the result. See that? So now I'm going to add some of that mermaid color. And I'm doing that because I want to try to balance it out a bit, because I've got the purple, I've got the blue, and now I'm bringing in some of that outside green blue color, or blue green. It looks blue on my camera, but it's actually a very nice bluish green. So see how I'm adding the alcohol from the inside, pushing out to move that color around a bit so that I can mix it enough to where you can see the color, and I may go back and add more as I go through moving it. I have some of the debris from the napkin or from the paper towel when I was wiping. I try to pick up as much of it as I could. See, I'm adding more. I'm going to be adding a little bit more. And then using the alcohol to help it spread. Oops. It's okay. Adding the alcohol in very selective areas to help push it in the direction that I need it to go. So hopefully you can see that greenish blue show through now. So now I'm going to balance it by adding more green blue on the top. And just help spread it with the alcohol. Kind of at a bad position because I'm on the other side of the canvas trying to push this ink back down from the top to the middle. But it's okay. It still works out because I'm at the edge of it anyway. There we go. Pushing some of that black off the canvas. There you go. So it's a lot of alcohol here, so I'm not going to add any more. I'm just going to dry this out a bit. And then if I need to, I'll go back and add more. Again, this is a lot of base coat for me. So I'm going to let it dry here. So this is going back and adding the cobalt. So this cobalt is a very rich blue purple. And you can see as soon as I add alcohol to it, the color just is really nice and high in pigment. And I'm doing this because I need some of that brighter blue purple in here versus the lighter gray blue that came from the Copic black. Using the alcohol again to create that direction, but you notice that the direction, it's not as controlled as it would be if it was through the brush. So I'm just moving the ink around, making sure that it doesn't stay too far on the outside edge. So I'm pushing it back to the center because I don't want too much of a harsh line on the outside or the top. I want most of the creation of lines through the center and midsection. So I think here, I've pushed it enough with the blow dryer. I'm still trying to move it with the blow dryer to help create those lines, and I've increased the speed of the blow dryer to see if I can create it. But usually the brush will give me more control when I try to bring in the the harsher, more distinct lines. Not harsh, but more distinct. So here I'm adding more alcohol to kind of fade the outside edge even more so. Almost cloud or like smoke. Just trying to dry it out as fast as possible so I can go in with my brush and start connecting the lines or create new ones. So I'm explaining that the lines that I want to create, I want the direction to go towards the center but at an angle, just like on the right side. So this is where the brush comes in handy, and the blow dryer. Brush and blow dryer together. Load the brush, start brushing the area that I want to create the line in, and use the blow dryer to move it to that crest, to that edge. And just again, load the brush and move the ink. Sometimes when the ink, there's a lot of ink, it's harder to create those lines, so you got to keep loading the brush and reapplying it to the same area to lift the ink a bit more. See that? See, the more you keep adding in that area, and it all depends on the blow dryer as well, and the pigment. But since this blue is very hard, dense in pigment, you have to add it a couple times. You have to keep applying alcohol in the same area more than once. So here I noticed that I don't have enough with the brush, so I'm using the blow dryer and more alcohol to be able to do that, to be able to create the lines. But the direction of the lines was already made with the brush, so you see the pigment areas that are dense are basically where I ran the brush, and while the alcohol is still wet, I go and use the brush to continue controlling the ink. See, because there's quite a bit of alcohol right now on the canvas. So here, I'll put down the brush in a minute. See how I'm moving. There you go. See, I'm kind of guiding the alcohol in the direction of where I want it to go with the brush. The object is not to hurry this area. I mean, if you ever need to, you just add more alcohol. But you don't want to hurry, because then you forget, or you may ruin something that you liked. I've done that many times, but it's okay. It's part of the process. So just keep reapplying, keep reapplying. So right now at this point, I'm using the alcohol that exists on the canvas. And I think I may load the brush here and go in and add more. So the idea of these lines are for them to be softer than the lines that are on the right, because the lines that are on the right are very compressed, dense. There's a lot of them. For this side of I want to relax the tension. There's a lot of tension on the right side of this canvas, and I want to relax the tension as we go towards the left of the screen. So I'm going to add a little bit more detail here with the brush. connect those lines to give it the direction I want. So I'm looking at this piece from stepping back. And as I look at it, I'm like, okay, I'm missing some purple. So I went in. See, when you look back and zoom out, you kind of start seeing the areas where you need certain colors. So once I stepped back, I was able to see that I have a lot of blue on the top left corner of the painting. So I went ahead and added some of that purple color that I have into it. So you can see kind of like where it starts on the top right, like the 2 o'clock, and then I've got a little bit in the middle, and then it goes a little bit more on the left, and now I'm adding the cobalt again on the outside edge. So I'm kind of blending it, trying to blend it and also merge it as I'm moving this color around again. So here I'm using this color as a base because I haven't added my lines in yet, but I need that base so that it seeps through as I do the detail lines. And I'm adding the blue so that I can make it blend it, basically blend it into the existing. And see how I'm using the brush because it's still wet. It's a little easier once it is wet to just give myself guidelines for where I want the alcohol to where the lines should be. And I keep stepping back as I do it so I can kind of look at it as a whole. And for larger pieces like this, it really helps to step back because it is flat and it's not on an easel. So it's, typical paintings, when it's on an easel, you can step back and look at it. But since this is flat, you got to kind of step back. And I stand on a stool so that I can step back and step up on the stool so I can kind of see it from the top. So here, since the painting is wet, the alcohol is wet, it's able to help me create those directional lines that I like. And you see how I'm kind of bringing them in from this side now. So since the alcohol is wet, it's actually a lot easier to move the alcohol and create those lines with the brush. And then once it dries, since it dries really quickly because it's 99%, I use the brush and load it and just keep creating and pushing the ink with the brush. You got to be a little pushy with alcohol ink. Don't be afraid of it. So I do have a lot of work left on the left side of this painting, facing you. There's going to be a lot more line work that needs to happen, and then I also need to add gold. Once I add the gold, I think I'll be done. But that could change. Once I add that gold, it could change the whole look of the painting because the gold is going to pick up some of the blues and the purples and move them around. So I have to be very cautious. Like I mentioned about the Rubik's Cube, you want to be very cautious on what you do and you don't move, but sometimes some of the things that you do move will be in a better benefit in the future for the painting itself. So here I'm just letting it dry, and I think that's it. I'm going to take a break. Stay tuned for part 5. It's Askari art. I really appreciate you watching to this part, and take care. And I'll have the next part soon. Thanks again. Bye-bye.